and welcome to I Hated That Book, the podcast where a woman in her rage era unapologetically complains about the books she can't escape. This week we are covering the beloved children's classic Howl's Moving Castle by Dianna Wynne Jones. This book was first published April 1st, 1986, and has since received a animated film adaptation in 2004 by Studio Ghibli, and the famous director Miyazaki, I believe is his name. On Goodreads, this book has 420,000 ratings and an average of 4.29. So here's the little back cover copy description. Sophie has the great misfortune of being the eldest of 3 daughters, destined to fail miserably should she ever leave home to seek her fate. But when she unwittingly attracts the ire of the Witch of the Waste, Sophie finds herself under a horrid spell that transforms her into an old lady. Her only chance at breaking it lies in the ever-moving castle in the hills, the wizard Howl's castle. To untangle the enchantment, Sophie must handle the heartless Howl, strike a bargain with a fire demon, and meet the Witch of the Waste head-on. Along the way, she discovers that there's far more to Howl and herself than meets the eye. Now, usually at this point, I do my little spiel about, spoilers, and I'm not trying to offend people. I just want to understand what it is I liked or disliked about books that everyone else seems to love when I don't love them in the same way. But I have a shock for you, my dearest listener. I adore this book. I love everything about this book so much. I have literally read it 3 times this year, and it's June 10th as I'm recording this. So this is not going to be me ripping apart a book. This is going to be me explaining all of the reasons why I adore this book. And so I'm going to talk for a minute about what it is I love about it to try to get you hooked. And then I'm going to talk more in depth about it. And I'll give you a little heads up because I'm going to talk spoiler free about why I love it so that I can try to convince you to read this book. And then I'm going to say at some point, spoilers here. And when I do that, if you have not read this book, or it sounds at all like, you trust my taste, maybe, or you're at all interested in the book, please go read the book and come back and listen to the rest because it's an amazing book and I love it so much. It is a children's book, but also who even cares? And I have a personal theory about children's books is that they have to be better than adult books because adult books often rely on graphic, sexual and violent content to sell, and children's books don't have that option, so they actually have to be good. That's just my hot take. Not to say that adult books can't be good, because some of them are, or that graphic material can't be found in good books, because it sometimes is. It just sells easier. Why do I love this book? I love everything about it. I love the main character, Sophie, so much. She's so relatable and funny and headstrong, and she's just such a great role model, a breath of fresh air. I mean, the entire premise, as I read, is that she's this 18-year-old girl, and she gets turned into an old lady, and she's just like, yeah, okay, I guess I'm old now. Because... it's just so funny. Part of it is she's literally a 90-year-old on the inside. And so when she gets turned into a 90-year-old on the outside, she's like, yeah, okay. And I just identify with that so deeply. I love the character relationships. I love all the characters. I love Howl. The whole world is delightful and enchanting and whimsical. It's reading this book, reading Howl's Moving Castle is the feeling of being hugged by a warm blanket. It's the feeling of sitting down with a nice cup of tea on a rainy day. It's the feeling of being hugged by someone you loved. It's the feeling of being wrapped up in a warm blanket. Howl's Moving Castle is just one of the most comforting pieces of media literature I have ever read in my life. And it is now on my list of go-to reads whenever I'm upset or angry or just need to pick me up because it's just so gentle and soothing and lovely. And it's so funny and fun and heartwarming, but also deep and thoughtful in a way that's kind of surprising for a children's book. The writing I also find to be just beautiful and sparse and elegant. I adore this book. I could just go on about all the reasons I love it. And yes, okay, it is a children's book. And in some ways, it gets away with some things that maybe in an adult book I would, criticize, maybe the ending's a little too neat. Whatever, it's a children's book. It's supposed to be fairy tale, whimsical kind of vibes. And it just nails that so well. There is a movie, also I will mention that briefly, from 2004. I know people adore this movie. People love Studio Ghibli. I loved the movie. I thought it was excellent. I actually liked the book a little bit better. I know that's a hot take. A lot of people like the movie better, but I liked the book better for two main reasons, which I will get into later because they're a little bit spoilery. But one of the reasons is there's just more. The movie, you're just like, oh, I never wanted it to end. And the book is just so much more of that stuff that you love. I'm also going to mention I mentioned that this book is very deep and thoughtful in a way that's very surprising and profound for a children's book. And I'm going to just mention a few of them right now so that you can kind of get an idea of it. And none of these are super spoilery. There's these very strong themes about age and youth, and they're tied into ideas about freedom and identity very strongly. And there's also this very strong like feminist undercurrent of this girl growing up into a woman and finding freedom in being older. There's so much about appearances and judgment. Sophie's ability to perceive reality and understand other people is one of the central conflicts going on in the story. And identity, themes of identity are tied into that. There's so much with appearances and disguises, who people really are, what these masks that they wear, how they present themselves, how they see themselves, who they really are underneath, regardless of how they see themselves and other people see them. It's just layer after layer of how people present themselves and what reality really means. It's so good. And I can talk a little bit more about these themes in more detail in my spoilery section. There's themes about love and what love means and family, destiny and fate. As the little blurb said, Sophie, she's like, oh, I'm the oldest sister, therefore I'm not going to have an interesting life. There's so much in the book about what it means to make your own fate and how you do that. So if this is at all sounds interesting, if you want to read the feeling of coziness, if you want I listened to the audiobook, it is just like listening to comfort. If this at all sounds interesting to you, please stop this podcast right now and go read this book. I do not want to spoil it because part of what is so good about it is how it all comes to how it comes together in the end, and I have to talk about that, and I have to talk about the character dynamics too. But I will say, if you're like still unconvinced, this book really lends itself to a reread because okay, so stop right now if you want to read the book. It really lends itself to a reread though, because Sophie's perception of reality is kind of skewed and it gets righted at the end. And so I immediately had to go back and read it again because the second time I started to see all these little hints that she was missing as the narrator, but she's still telling you about. And you're like, yeah, duh, Sophie. Of course that's what's going on. But when the first time you read it, you're so in her head that if you're not like being super critical, you just accept the way that she's presenting reality. So seriously though, this is your last chance to turn off the podcast and go read the book. Okay, so as always, I'm going to talk about the characters, the plot, the world building, and I'm going to read some reviews, but they're going to be 5-star reviews because I love this book and I don't want to read 1-star reviews. That's not funny when I love it. Maybe I should have done that. I don't know. So the characters. Our main character is Sophie. As I mentioned, she's just so relatable, being this 18-year-old in the body of a 90-year-old. I just love that I find it so relatable that she basically is a 90-year-old woman on the inside, and then she gets turned into one on the outside, and she's like, yeah, no, okay, this fits. Like, it's just so funny. And as an old person on the inside, I find this deeply, deeply relatable. I love that aging a lot of times can be presented as scary and, everything's about recovering your youth and blah, blah, blah. And in a way, Sophie is trying to get her youth back, but she finds so much freedom in being older. She's not worried about what people think about her, about what her destiny is supposed to be, and why. She's just not worried about what anyone else expects from her. She's just like, yeah, okay, I'm going to say what I want, do what I want. It's just amazing how age frees her. It's very cool. She's so funny and headstrong. She's unapologetic. She's dutiful and kind and loyal and selfless and determined. But she's also self-deluded and nosy. Howl always calls her Miss Nose. And she's so flawed, but she's also so perfect. And I adore her. She's such a wonderful main character. Such a breath of fresh air. I adore her. So the other main character is Howl, obviously, the scary wizard Howl. I love this man. I love how at the beginning he's kind of villainous. The whole time he's kind of mysterious. He's presented as scary Howl who eats girls' hearts. And And, Sophie meets him and he's you kind of can't really get a grasp on him. He's a slitherer outer. That's what she calls him. But then the more and more you see of him in the book, there's so many layers to him. There's so much contradiction and tension in his character, which is just so fun to read about. He's hilarious. He's this giant man baby and he's so dramatic and obsessive and vain. And it's so funny. And at the same time, this giant man baby is so kind and thoughtful and caring of others deep down. And then when they reveal that he is Howl Jenkins' PhD, I died. I was like, stop, I'm dying. Of course he's a PhD student. Oh my God, of course this man has a PhD. Of course, this explains so much. Oh, and then at the end when he's like, yeah, of course I've known you were cursed all along. Are you kidding me? You're like, yeah, no, of course he has known. That's one of the things that you get on the reread, especially someone else walks in and is cursed and he notices immediately. And that's the first kind of hint as a reader, if you're being careful, that you're like, oh yeah, maybe he does know that she's cursed. How could he not realize that she's cursed? And then at the end, he's like, yeah, I knew the whole time. And she's like, oh, I just also have to say, he has the entire time this guitar. Howl's a bit of a womanizer. And the reason that he's a bit of a womanizer, if you've read the book, is that because he doesn't have a heart. Literally every time Calcifer's like, oh, heartless Howl, Calcifer has Howl's heart. So something's missing. You can tell his development is stunted. He doesn't quite know how to love people because he literally doesn't have a heart. And so he's searching the entire book for love because something's missing from his life. And so he's kind of a womanizer and you're like, And so he has this guitar that he keeps bringing and like serenading women with. And then at the end, someone tunes it and you realize that the entire time Howl has just been wailing away on this out of tune guitar. And you're like, no, stop. I'm dying. Stop. Oh my God. That's so fun. I thought it was hilarious. I love Howl. He's so funny. Like he's insufferable, but that's kind of part of the fun. He's just so funny. Would I like to know him in real life? Absolutely not. But is he fun to read about? Absolutely. And then we have Calcifer, the fire demon, who again, like Howl, starts off kind of being scary and intimidating or whatever. And then you get to see that he's actually amazing and adorable and wonderful. When you realize at the end that Calcifer is the one who has Howl's heart. And so the people that Howl allows to stay in the house, the people that Howl loves are the people that Calcifer likes because he has Howl's heart. You're like, no, stop, I'm crying. I'm not crying, you're crying. I love Calcifer's so sassy and funny. And I love when he's always like, Sophie, you moron, I just gave you a hint. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know what I mean? Heartless Howl, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know what I mean? And she's like, I just don't understand. Love him. Michael is fun too. He's Howl's 15-year-old apprentice. He's there. He's so cute and diligent. I love the addition of him as a character because they have this family dynamic and also because he's a great character for Sophie to talk to and interact with that also keeps Howl a mystery. Her sisters, Martha and Letty, are really fun too. I like the family dynamic because they quarrel and they fight, but at the end of the day, they have each other's backs and they have their stepmother, Fanny, too, and she's pretty fun. And I just adore the fact that, so at the beginning of the book when Sophie she's like, oh, I'm cursed. Well, all right, I guess I might as well make my fate. And the entire time she's like, well, no one's going to recognize me and I can't possibly face seeing my family, which is kind of, you're like, Sophie, are you making excuses? But at the end, they walk in and they're immediately like, oh my God, Sophie. And she's like, oh, you would have known it was me this entire time. And they're like, yeah, of course we know who you are. You're our sister / stepdaughter. Of course we know who you are. And this is one of those things I mentioned earlier about the theme of appearances and whatever, because Martha and Letty disguise each other. But one of the things is that one of the sisters tells her, oh, Fanny is such a terrible stepmom, blah, blah, blah. She's taking advantage of you. And so then Sophie buys into this. And then at the end, she realizes that she has just accepted her sister's perception of the world and Fanny. And that's actually not accurate. The Witch of the Waste is a fun villain. And I thought the reveal at the ending was a good twist about who the real villain is. I also have to talk about the romance. So if you're looking for a really explicit romance, not even just in terms of sex, but a lot of flirty flirt and explicitly characters thinking about, oh my God, do they like me? Oh my God, I'm so into them. If you're into that kind of romance, maybe you wouldn't like this as much because it's a very subtle romance. And a lot of the stuff that is happening, you kind of have to put together in your own head. Okay, so Sophie's being jealous right now, kind of thing. And because it's a lot of subtext is where the romance is found. I love this romance. I think it's so wholesome and pure. This is not romance. This is love. This is two strong, independent, and flawed people who come to see past appearances and the face that the other person puts on for the world, and they love them for who they are, flaws and all. Like, oh my God, no, I'm not crying. You're crying. Stop it. For example, the scene at the end, so the whole time Howl is just this vain womanizer, right? And Sophie thinks, dang, the first time he goes out without all his hair done and his makeup on, I don't know if he wears makeup, but that's gonna be real love. And then so that at the end he comes to save her, and they're like flying around, whatever, and she looks at him and she thinks, wow. So at this point, she still thinks that he's in love with this other woman. And she thinks, wow, he must really love this other woman because he didn't even like do his hair. He looks like a mess. And you're like, no, Sophie. Oh my God, Sophie loves you. Sophie. It's just so cute. She's so clueless and in denial. And I just love her little jealousy. Like the entire time she's obsessed with which suit he's wearing because she told one of the suits that he was like a charmer. And so then she thinks that the suit that he's wearing is the reason that all these girls are falling in love with him. And she's like so jealous, but she never actually says it. Ugh. And again, I think Sophie is a lot like Elizabeth Bennet in that perceiving reality correctly and perceiving other people correctly is one of her big flaws. And so that's something that has to get corrected at the end. And Howl really does care for her, and you can see it in his teeny little actions. Everything from taking away her aches and pains to, he buys her a nice dress. Like he takes her in. He does so many like kind little things for her throughout the book, even though he's like, ugh, whatever. And then he just is so kind to her. And you're like, would I want to be married to Howl? Absolutely not. But I think they're cute together. This is one reason I actually don't like the movie as much as I mentioned earlier. I think the movie romance is more insta love. And I think it's actually way deeper in the book and less tropey actually in a way. So moving on to the plot. This is one of those books where everything is significant. Every word is there for a reason. Every image, every character, everything. And I love it. It all gets wrapped up really neatly at the end, which I get it. It's fine if you don't want it, but this is a children's book and it has this really dreamy fairy tale vibe to it. And in those stories, everything does need to come together in the end. So that works really well, I think, here. And I just love it when things come together and have meaning. Everything from at the beginning, Sophie tells all the hats like, oh, you're going to have to marry Money. And then she finds out at the end that the person she gave the hat to is Fanny, who married Money. Like everything comes back in the end. And I think they're also, even though it is a very cozy and cute story, there is still this constant threat of Sophie needs the curse to be lifted, and there is the Witch of the Waste running around in the background. So there is suspense and whatever pulling you through with regards to that. With regard to the world building, I loved this world building. It's not super detailed or intense. So if you want a really hard magic system, if you want a Brandon Sanderson magic system, this isn't for you. But if you want whimsical, charming fairy tale, if you want faraway kingdoms, this is the book for you. It is actually a portal fantasy in a way, kind of like Narnia, because Howl Jenkins, PhD, is from Wales. I laughed so hard when he went to Wales. I think it's hilarious, the whole scene where they like describing the modern world from the point of view of Sophie and Michael. And this is one thing that's actually not in the movie, which is kind of a disappointment, but she's like describing like a car and all these things, and it's just so fun that he is from Wales. Oh my God. And actually in the audiobook narration, she does the Welsh accent, and I didn't realize that at first. I thought she was just doing a Howl voice, and then so I love the world building. Okay, so I'm going to read some 5-star reviews because they have some interesting things to say about the book. So this is from S. Penkovich. He says, Howl is an absolute delight as a character. Dianna Wynne Jones, jokes in interviews that when girls say they're in love with Howl, she says not to do that because he's awful, joking that in response to them saying that they would like to marry Howl, she says, Howl would be one of the most dreadful husbands one could possibly imagine, but his duality gives him a charm and a weight as a character that is rather infectious, and this dude is supposed to be hot, so I get it. From Natalia, maybe there is more to the world than meets the eye. Maybe first impressions are misleading, and really getting to know someone allows surprising things to shine through. Maybe there are fallen stars and stolen hearts and traveling scarecrows and cowards that are brave and slither outers who are honest and seemingly shallowness that has startling depths and annoyance that grows into affection, which I think this is the heart of the book, because it just has this sense that the world is greater and better than it is, and it warms my cold dead heart. Okay, so back to Natalia's review. Is it a children's book? I don't know. It's simple and sweet, and yet can be complex in unexpected ways. It sure spoke to this adult over here. Its humor is kind, but at times also a bit quirky. It delightfully turns familiar tropes upside down and makes me happily smile again and again. It makes my inner cynic slink away in shame. Natalia, I feel you. I think that's a fantastic review because it really gets to the heart of what I loved about this book and puts it in a really beautiful and poetic way about how this book really is about imagining that there is more to the world. From Allie, we have a melodramatic blonde man has a mobile home and adopts strays, including but not limited to orphans and bewitched crabby young women. There's a lot of hobbling and wailing and throwing oneself onto a settee in despair, but Howl's gonna howl. Reading this was not unlike settling into an overstuffed chair with a warm bowl of your favorite soup, comfort-wise, and all the shouting really starts to feel more boisterous than angry pretty quickly. Foppish heroes, exasperated heroines, and an overworked fire demon, this club has it all. I just think that's hilarious that a melodramatic blonde man has a mobile home. From Sarah, we have, if you were starting to think that all YA heroines are either brassy Amazon warrior princesses or sniveling Bella Swans, allow Sophie Hatter to break you out of your funk. Sophie starts out as a painfully timid girl who wears only plain gray dresses and rarely ventures outside the hat shop. She is so convinced of her own plainness that when a handsome stranger approaches her, she assumes he's mocking her and runs away. I think a lot of us can relate to this. As an old lady, she takes on about 20 levels of chutzpah. She's assertive, no nonsense, and occasionally cantankerous, but never truly unkind. She becomes the only being in the universe who can make Howl Pendragon obey. For Howl is a flighty, easily frightened creature who has built a fearsome reputation for himself in the hope of avoiding conflict. He is the most accomplished wizard in the land, but he shirks from responsibilities that must inevitably come with that status. He craves love, but flits from one girl to the next with no intention of settling down anytime soon. But don't let his temperamental glam rock exterior fool you. He is one of the cleverest, kindest, and gentlest men you will ever meet in YA. And a lot of his theatrics are covered for his dastardly, altruistic, foolhardy plans. If you want a book boyfriend, look no further. I love this review because it gets at something I forgot to mention, which is another aspect of Howl. I mean, the transformation of Sophie, which I got at earlier, but also the Howl being a coward and has, he tells all these rumors and spreads all these rumors and lies about himself so that he never has to work or do anything scary because he's a total coward. And he's like, yeah, no, I am a coward. I love it. Overall, Howl's Moving Castle melted my cold, dead, cynical heart. I love this book so much. I've read it 3 times this year. I adore this book. If we're giving 5 stars, I would give this book 6 stars if I could. Okay, I adore this book. The movie is also fantastic. It just makes you feel like a kid again in the best way possible. I had never read this book before. This was the first time I had read it this year. It is so enchanting and delightful. I would recommend it to anybody in a heartbeat because if it melted my cold, cynical, dead heart, it could melt yours just like it melted Howl's. Sophie has the power to melt cold, dead, cynical hearts, I think is what the lesson we're getting, because she does it to Howl and Calcifer and she does it to me. So I could just continue talking about this book. Thank you so much for listening to this very unexpected episode where I actually for once did not hate a book, and we'll see you next week. Bye!